Hey everyone, I hope we're having a good week. I hope that it's not too stressful because I know that a lot of midterms are coming up. And I hope things have been super good. Today we're going to go ahead and talk about chapter 14. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Cool. All right, so we're going to talk about organizing, writing, and outlining presentations. This will be really important for you to know next week when you are organizing, writing, and outlining your speech presentations. So the chapter outcomes for this chapter, you're going to organize and support your main points. You're going to choose an appropriate organizational pattern for your speech, and you're going to move smoothly from point to point. You are also going to choose an appropriate and powerful language, right? We're not going to use wishy-washy language. We're going to develop an introduction and a conclusion. We're going to develop a strong introduction, conclusion, crucial parts of all speeches. That's a weird sentence. We're going to develop strong introductions and conclusions. Okay, we're going to prepare an effective outline that helps your listeners or me follow your speech while you're giving it. So main points. So main points are the central claims that support your specific purpose and thesis statements. These will be ideas that will lead the audience to accept or consider what you're asking them to do, believe, or consider, right? You're going to have 3 main points for your speeches. So you're going to have your thesis and then 3 main points supporting your thesis, conclusion. And also an introduction. So supporting your main points. Each main point should be one major idea. You're going to have subpoints to support the main points. And in these subpoints, you are going to utilize your research. This is where you're going to put facts, stats, and evidence. You're going to represent a clear hierarchy of ideas. And you're going to subpoint support the subpoints, which I will show you a photo of on the next page because that can all sound very confusing just written down. But you need to ask yourself before you add each subpoint, does this bit of information back up my main point? Like, is this actually supporting what it is that you're trying to say, right? So, like, an example of this would be like a thesis. This is silly, but like dogs are better than cats. And your 3 main points would be dogs are better than cats because they're smarter, they're more loyal, and they, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank, sorry y'all. And they, I don't know, you can take cats on walks. They go to the bathroom outside and not in a litter box. Anyway, so those would be your 3 subpoints. And now you need evidence, research, and facts to back up those 3 subpoints, right? So we see the thesis statement at the top, and then your first main point. So the first main point, like in the example I gave, is they're smarter. So subpoint 1, they're easier to train and then give evidence, right? So like facts, stats, or even a personal anecdote. Subpoint 2, you're going to talk about how they have bigger brains. I don't even know if that's true. Research will support anything these days. And you're going to talk about how, and then facts, stats, evidence, anecdotes. And then subpoint number 3, trainability or something. I don't know if that was my main point 1, but just the trainability or the routine nature of dogs versus cats, because dogs like routine. I don't know, something like that. But you get the point, right? And then facts, stats, evidence. So this is a thesis statement and main point 1. And then you're going to do the exact same thing for main point 2 and then main point 3. Right? So that is going to give you the meat of your speech. That is what you're going to be talking about the most, your main points. And that's what's really, really going to sell your argument. I guess that was a persuasive speech. Don't give a speech on why dogs are better than cats. Don't do it. Not very informative speech. That will be bad. Your grade will not reflect well. Anyway, bad example, but that's okay. Maybe just give a speech on like a process, like the process of, I don't know, the process of electing a president. What does that look like? What do voters do? How do voters affect the election, right? The electoral college, how does that work? Like something like that, right? So main point 1, the process of the electoral college. Main point 2, the process of individual voters. So like things like that. are things that we want to see. So organizing your speech. So you're going to arrange your points, and you can do this in a couple of ways. You can do chronological patterns. You can organize points by time. So if you're giving a speech on how the Electoral College works, like what happens first and then what happens next, right? And then topical patterns, you can organize your patterns. Topical patterns organize points by category. That is a sentence. So you can categorize it, right? So you could just, instead of doing the process of the Electoral College, you can do like the Electoral College, individual voters, and then one more, like the election cycle. Like you can talk about it based on topic as opposed to timeline. Primary recency effect, save the best for last. Like we are really interested in listening, but if you leave us at the end with something to remember, that will have the greatest impact for your speech. Spatial patterns organize points by physical proximity to each other. So literally like physical proximity, right? So like, I don't know, California is closer to Arizona. You're going to talk about those, like you're going to organize California, Arizona, and then Florida, so you're not going to go California, Florida, Arizona. That was a silly example, but spatial patterns literally organize points by physical proximity to each other. And then arranging your points. So problem solution patterns arrange 3 key points: problem, possible solutions, and then the best solution. So if you do a problem solution, you're going to have your problem. You're going to start with your problem. You're going to talk about all the possible solutions, and then you're going to end with the best one, right? Like, I don't know, think of a problem. The best way to get ants out of your house, I don't know. Our cause-effect patterns follow cause to effect or effect to cause relationships. So if you're doing cause and effect, you can talk about them either way, right? So you can talk about the effect and then the causes, or you can talk about the causes and how that impacts everything else. And then narrative patterns arrange points using stories. I love a good narrative pattern. I love storytelling. I love people who are good at telling stories. So narrative pattern is always something that's really cool to do. And it's easier to tell a story than it is to give a speech. I'm not saying do that, because you still need to incorporate facts and evidence, but sometimes just stories are easier for the audience to listen to. Like I had a student who gave a speech, and she basically told the story of the movie Knives Out. And she could tell us who the bad guy was from the very beginning, because Apple doesn't like their products being used by the bad guys in movies because they think it tarnishes their brand. So the bad guy was the only person, sorry if you haven't seen it, spoiler, just fast forward a couple seconds. But the bad guy in the movie was the only person that didn't have an iPhone. He had an Android. So you could tell who the bad guy was right away, but she walked us through the entire story first before she told us that. And we were all very engaged. It was very interesting. So narrative is good. Arranging your points. So Monroe's motivated sequence pattern follows 5 phases. This is kind of a tough one. So if you don't use this pattern, that's okay, but it's really important for you to know because it will likely be on an exam or a quiz. So Monroe's motivated sequence arranges through 5 phases. So attention, need, and then satisfying that need, visualization of the satisfaction, and then action, right? So like a call to action, like what you can do to take next steps to do this thing, or what you can do to help. So if it's like, I don't know, if it's like save the planet, then recycle. Like recycle would be your call to action, right? So if saving the environment was the speech we're going to get or talk about, we would be bringing attention, or we would call the need for attention to the environment. We would talk about the need through statistics, global warming stats. We would talk about what satisfies that need. We would talk about what helps that, like through the elimination of the use of fossil fuels, or really just writing to our local companies that use a majority of, or that expend a majority of our fossil fuels, and telling them to stop. And then what that would look like in a world without big companies that use all our fossil fuels and, I don't know, do a lot of damage to the environment, it would look like this, and we would live sustainably, and it would be awesome. We'd all drive Priuses. And then a call to action is what you can do to help fulfill that visualization. So that was a silly example, but those are the 5 phases. And for an informative speech, this is something that you could definitely do minus the call to action, because in a persuasive speech, we don't want to persuade. We don't want to persuade our audience to do anything. So if you do choose to use this, do so carefully. Connecting your points. Use transitions such as in addition to or next, let me describe. So you need transitions between points, right? So you're going to talk about, now that I've told you how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or now that I've taught you the best ingredients to use for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, next we're going to talk about the best way to put together that peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And that's with more peanut butter than jelly, you know? So you're going to use transitions. So first, next, or in addition to, next I'm going to describe. You need those transitions to have smooth flow, and so the audience can feel where you're going. So you need to use signposts such as next, once, or on the other hand, also so we know if you're moving on to another point and we don't get caught up in you just speaking this. Use internal previews to show what's coming next. So internal previews look like at the end of your introduction, you're going to say something like, first, we're going to talk about the best ingredients for a peanut butter and jelly. Next, we're going to talk about the best way to put together a peanut butter and jelly. And finally, we're going to talk about the best places to consume a peanut butter and jelly, to just kind of preview where you're going. And in your conclusion, you need to tie a little bow on it and say something like, now that we've talked about, and just list your 3 points. Now that we've talked about, I don't know, best ingredients for PB&J, best way to put together a PB&J, and best places to eat a PB&J, we can go ahead and tie this up by talking about the importance of PB&J and the cultural significance of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so we need to use those internal previews to just kind of tie a bow on it, or at least lead the audience into the speech. So use internal summary, and then you need to use these internal summaries to remind the audience of what's been covered so they don't forget, right? It's so easy to zone out during a speech, you know, and your job is to make sure your audience does not. All right, use language that works. Respect your audience. Keep it simple. Use vivid language. You want to suck them in. You want them to want to hear what you have to say. You want to be enthralling and engaging. And then use language to make a lasting impression, like rhetorical tools, using repetition, allusion, comparisons, like similes and metaphors, right? Like the more we say something, the more likely we are to have people remember it, you know? So do that without being excessive. But if you do leave the audience with something to remember, you've accomplished your goal. All right, so you can capture your audience's attention by using a surprise. Do something they don't expect. Like in class, this would be someone standing on a chair to give a speech, like telling a story. We as human beings love stories. Start with a quote that's compelling that we haven't heard before, not like the million other quotes that's on everybody's Instagram captions. Ask a question, get people engaged. This is a little bit tougher with the speech that's online, but if you ever have to give a speech, like at a wedding, like ask a question. How many times have you guys ever seen Billy, I don't know, do something silly? Like get the audience to engage with you, like make them feel like they know the person or they understand you or you are a relatable character in their life, because that's going to make them hear you. Or make them laugh, crack a joke. Sometimes jokes miss, and that's fine. But I would go ahead and test them out on people beforehand, before you crack a joke. Otherwise, you get crickets, which can be excellent if you're giving a speech that's intended to come off that way, but really embarrassing if you crack a joke and no one laughs, right? So practice your jokes a few times if you're going to throw them in there. Funny speeches have the warmest receptions typically, but you don't have to give a funny speech if you're giving a topic on something serious, but we all love a good funny speech. Introduce your purpose. Oh, and actually statistically, funny speeches are graded more favorably. So yeah, typically they're graded higher, and not just for me, like universally, because we think more fondly about the moment when we reflect on grading, which is so interesting. Trust me not to be biased, but it will help. It will not harm. Introduce your purpose and thesis. Incorporate your thesis statement. Preview your main points. Crafting a strong introduction. You're going to introduce your purpose and thesis statements. Incorporate your thesis statement towards the end, but you're going to do it before your preview statement, where you talk about all the things that you're going to be talking about throughout your speech. preview your main points, tell the listeners what points you will discuss in the order and which you will discuss them so they don't get confused. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3. So it's just clear for everybody, especially if you're choosing not to use a PowerPoint. That can get really confusing really quickly. And then connect with your audience. Show them why they should care and appeal to their personal needs, right? Like with the environment. How many of you like to breathe air? Like appeal to them. Like appeal to like why it should matter. Make them listen to you. All right, and then signal the end, use a transitional phase. Say something like, in conclusion, or now that we're nearing the end, make sure we know that we're in the conclusion. Reinforce your topic, purpose, and main points. Give listeners a mental checklist, right? Like, now that we've talked about PB&J ingredients and how to craft a PB&J, and these are check marks, by the way, and the best places to eat a PB&J. Now we can wrap up by saying peanut butter and jelly sandwiches have made a splash as a cultural phenomenon because they're a food that we look to whenever we're in a rush. They're a food that is widely accepted as common in American culture, and it has, simplified the needs of Americans everywhere. Some things, like wrap it, tie a bow tie on it, make us remember. And make sure we go through that mental checklist. We want to make an impact. Use quotes, statements, questions, a final story, or a reference to the introduction. Challenge the audience to respond. Encourage them to use their new information unless it's an informative speech, and encourage them a call to action where appropriate. So call to actions, awesome in persuasive speeches. Do it in persuasive speeches. Do not do it in informative speeches. You will get marked down. But if you're talking about like the cultural significance of something, like they will have a memory of that, and they will probably remember that when making their decisions in the future, and you don't even have to say it if you have a compelling enough informative speech, right? So for outlining your speeches, an outline is structured. We know what an outline is. An outline is a structured form of your speech content that confirms your points are arranged clearly, ensures you've cited your research, and assists in delivery of your speech. So also, I will be having an outline because you'll send it to me ahead of time, and it'll help me follow along in your speech, making sure you're hitting all your points and you're citing things correctly. Because not only do you need to cite things in your speech, you need to cite them verbally. If you give a statistic and don't tell me who told you that statistic, that is plagiarism. You need to find all of this stuff. My quarterback just got a touchdown in fantasy football. Outlining essentials, use standard symbols. Use standard symbols. This means things like bullet points. This means things like asterisks or bold things if you think they're important. Use subdivisions properly. Divide up your speech in a way that makes sense. Make sure your main point 1 and your subpoints and your sub-subpoints are all very clearly labeled, and make sure they're not all in one paragraph that's hard to tell them apart, because it's hard to tell if you have all your points that way. Separate the parts of your speech, call out your specific purpose and thesis, cite your sources, and give your speech a title. It makes it easier for everyone to remember. Styles of outlining. Sentence outlines use the full text of your speech. Like you can write out your entire speech in full sentences if you remember better that way. You can use phrases and outline key phrases, right? So keyword outline, and then keyword outlines use keywords to jog your memory. So like bullet points if you don't remember things verbatim, right? So you can use phrase outlines and key phrases in your speech, or you can use keyword outlines and just use bullet points to jog your memory if you're like, and then look down at your main point. From preparation outline to speaking outline. This firms up your thesis and creates main points and more supporting points. And then your speaking delivery outline, this will be different, right? So your speaking outline is going to be different than your preparation outline. Your preparation outline is going to lay everything out. You're going to practice that maybe 10 times. And then for your speaking outline, you're theoretically going to need far less information on it, right? So Your delivery outline is probably just going to have the points you always forget on it. Just in case you forget, you can glance down, look back up, and keep speaking about the things that you were just talking about or the point you may or may not have forgotten. If you forget something, that's okay. Don't go back to it. That's confusing. If you're on point number 3 and you forgot a point in number 1, don't say it in point number 3. That is confusing. That's where things get jumbled. Just move on. I guarantee nobody's noticed you've forgotten. And then final speech plan. This includes delivery cues and oral citations. Say your citations out loud, delivery cues. Typically in class, typically when we give speeches in class, I put up like 30 seconds, 1 minute, like when you have like 1 minute or 30 seconds left, so you know to wrap up your speech. Because if you do go over in speaking time, you will get marked down. You need to be within the appropriate window to get all of the points. So it's kind of an all or nothing points. I think it's 5 points. If you're under, you don't get those 5 points. If you're over, you don't get those 5 points. It's a lot easier at home because you can see the little timer for how long you've been speaking. But in class it's a little bit harder, and typically for things like this, like if you take public speaking, they'll give you like time signals to let you know when to wrap up. But we don't need to do that. So all that to say, please email me if you have any questions or if you just want to practice. Honestly, like I'm here to help you practice. If you have any questions about delivery or giving a speech, be sure to reach out, email me. We can make a Zoom appointment, go through it a couple of times, no pressure. And we could just talk about things that would help you as a speaker because everybody's different. Try to leave out as many verbal fillers as possible. I know, do as I say, not as I do, because I know I say all the time. Do your best to avoid the ums. They happen. I understand you won't be marked down for them, but you're perceived as a more confident speaker when you don't use those filler words. So be sure to avoid filler words as best as possible. And I hope you are all having a good Sunday. I hope if you play fantasy, your team is winning. Mine, unfortunately, is not. But I look forward to hearing from you all soon, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing your speeches. All right, y'all. Bye.